Hello, this is the game Resident Evil 2, but I'm going to use it as a background because I'm going to start doing movie reviews, which you probably know because you probably clicked on this and it has the title Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City Review. Seedge says avoid. Oh boy. Um, I went to see the new Resident Evil film this morning. I have an unlimited card, which means I get to go and see films for free, which is nice because that's probably the worst film I've seen in about a decade. I took some notes on Twitter throughout to try and make sense of it all, but I'm going to try and keep this spoiler free. It doesn't work as a horror movie. The monsters, such as they are terribly inconsistent. Like, everyone knows zombies. You know, zombies try to eat you, or your brains, or both. There are multiple occasions in the movie where zombies are directly in front of or near someone that they could attack, and they don't. Like, one just wanders off. Another one decides to go for a sneak attack and flank around behind his target, as opposed to just, attacking the person he was directly in front of in the dark. Because it makes for better jump scares for the audience, but it doesn't make any sense for the actual film, for it being a zombie movie, it's dumb and bad. And there's never really any sense of danger for the protagonists. Like, if you don't know anything about Resident Evil, you might not know who's going to live to see the end. But if you've played the games, which you probably have since you're going to see a film called Resident Evil, like you've got a pretty good idea of who's going to be utterly invincible. Which is weird because there are scenes where characters are in clearly deadly situations where they should be dead, and then plot armor just saves them. Some of which is from some of the worst Deus Ex Machinas of all time, and it's just random and bad. It does a terrible job of trying to stitch together the stories of two separate games, and this boils down a lot of the problems that the movie has. Resident Evil 2 is a game that takes about 8 or 9 hours your first playthrough. Like, exploring, occasionally getting murdered, solving puzzles, but, you know, watching the story cutscenes and reading the files to get the backstory and stuff like that. The first Resident Evil, I think, takes about the same length of time for most people to get through in their first run. Sure, if you speedrun them, you can get through them in under a couple of hours apiece, skipping the story, skipping the files, skipping the puzzles because you already know the solutions. But Welcome to Raccoon City tries to squeeze together two 8-hour games into one under 2 hours movie, and because of it, nobody really has any time to do anything or to breathe or to let you get to know their characters at all. And the characters that they are might as well be entirely new creations because nobody, not one of the characters with a name from the game, is anything like their counterparts in the games. Like, I feel like I might have felt better about this movie if it had been an entirely new IP, which it kind of feels like it was with the way that the characters are written. Like, everyone's origins are different, and the motivations of several of the characters are highly questionable, and people do things that doesn't make any sense. And yeah, like, I'm just looking over my notes here, and it's just, why did they even make a Resident Evil movie if we're just not gonna have half of this stuff in it, or have some of this stuff that just means nothing or is completely the opposite of how it works in the game? Like, why even bother? Honestly, um, there's a whole bunch of little. I mean, you can't see me doing the air quotes here, but Easter eggs, which are literally just them saying like, "Hey, we're saying the thing that's like in the game. Hey, you remember that? You remember that? Where one of the characters said that thing? Well, we said it there. Yeah. See, we know what we're talking about. But what it actually feels more like is that somebody scrunched up a bunch of memes and references from the first two Resident Evil games, threw them into a hat, and then the scriptwriters were forced at gunpoint to write the story around them. I was like, jeez, how are we going to make sure we get a scene where we get the words jail sandwich into one of the characters' mouths? It's like, well, what if we set a scene at a diner and Jill can have a sandwich? It's like, perfect, we'll do that. So yeah, it doesn't work as a horror movie because the stakes are practically non-existent, and the characters that you know are going to be invincible are invincible, and there's never really any threat or danger, and it's not scary. Like there's not really any jump scares that are going to get you, unless it's the first horror movie you've ever seen, possibly just after seeing Boss Baby for the first time. Um, it's not a good Resident Evil movie. It's a really really bad Resident Evil movie because, like I say, they seem to just have no idea why people like the games. And because of the way they've smushed the two movies together as well, it also means that they've avoided a bunch of situations where they could have easily had a sequel doing Resident Evil 3, because Resident Evil 3 can't exist in that universe because it happens before and after Resident Evil 2, which happens before Resident Evil 1 in this movie. And none of timelines make sense, and none of the vectors for transmission make sense, and the Umbrella Corps are in the movie for about 4 to 5 seconds, and they do stuff that they didn't actually do in the games. And okay, small spoiler here, but in the games, a kind of important part of the story is that the U.S. government is culpable for some of it, in that like the U.S. government helps with the quarantining of Raccoon City during the outbreak over the end of September, and like the U.S. government is responsible for the destruction of Raccoon City at the end of the series of games, and at the end of Resident Evil 3, which again can't happen in this movie because that's the way they do it. But yeah, they're not in this film. Like, there's none of the whole thing of like, the U.S. government giving Umbrella money for bioweapons or for combat data or helping them to cover up their crimes. They're just like, Umbrella. They're just an evil corporation who apparently pulled out of Raccoon City and left only poor people there. So it's okay to kill them when they turn into zombies because they're all poor people anyway. That's the implication of quite a few of the scenes, which are very strange. And I feel like that's kind of blunting the teeth a little bit on some of the stuff that Resident Evil had to say. But yeah, doesn't work as a horror movie. Doesn't work as a Resident Evil movie. There's a post-credit scene that sets it up for a sequel, and I really hope they just don't. Like, the only thing I can say about it is that the actors are okay. Like, everyone does the best they can with the dialogue and the script they're given. Like, the fact that they're playing essentially different characters from the name they've got isn't their fault. Like, that's just how they were wrote. But, they do a pretty good job of acting the characters as they're written. Like, that's it's nothing to blame there. It's just the script writing and the direction's okay. I mean, the action scenes are pretty easy to follow for the most part, apart from one terrible sequence with flashing lights in the mansion. And, like, it's really just a really, really bad script, so lets the whole thing down. Honestly, you want to do a Resident Evil thing right, just make a TV show. Like, just make a TV show. And that way you don't have to cram everything into 2 hours, and you can actually space it out a bit. Let people get to know the characters, including the characters who aren't going to make it to the end, so you actually feel something when they die, as opposed to just, oh, there goes that guy. What was his name? Oh, doesn't matter. So yeah, Welcome to Raccoon City is definitely an avoid. It's up there for being one of the worst films I've seen in the last decade, and possibly even this millennium, because it's just that dull and, I suppose, disrespectful to the canon is probably a bit of a nerdy thing to say, but yeah, it doesn't feel like it's doing any justice to the franchise. Like, the story of Resident Evil is a pretty good one. I mean, heck, if they'd wanted to make even just a Resident Evil 2 movie without doing the Resident Evil 1 movie, they could have just done that. They could have just excised the mansion part and just had the story focus on Leon and Claire, and they could have had more stuff at the RPD and actually have the Birkins, feature in the story. But nope, nope, they decided not to do that. So yeah, don't go and see that film, even if it's free. I mean, it's just really, really, really boring. So, if you don't agree, feel free to let me know in the comments, and we can have a more spoiler-filled discussion down there, and we can talk more specifics about it. But yeah, it's just terrible, just terrible.